Hello guys, hello homies. I hope this video will be interesting for you. So my name is Paul. I am from Ukraine. I am from the eastern part of Ukraine, and I stay here even during the war. And in this video I would like to discuss the topic: are Ukrainians tolerant? First of all the opinions in this video will be my own opinion, my personal observations. I believe that yes, in general, Ukrainians are tolerant, and I describe some cases. My first tutor of English was a guy from Zimbabwe, from the Ndebele tribe, and he was a student in our city. He married a woman from Ukraine, and to be a teacher of English was one of the ways for him to earn money in Ukraine. I chatted with him a lot, I spoke to him a lot, and we discussed a lot of topics about life and so on. According to his words, he had problems when he searched for work because some employers didn't want to hire him, to hire a foreigner. And he said that when employers saw that he was African, they often didn't want to hire him. But I think it is not about racism, it's rather about our employers who don't want to have troubles hiring foreigners, because it may be difficult and connected to additional steps during hiring, and so it is about employers. Then this Zimbabwean guy worked as a teacher of English, and also he was a seller of premium stuff, online seller. He tried to work in IT sphere and so on. By the way, this Zimbabwean guy told us a story that his brother, his cousin, studied in Western Ukraine. He learned Ukrainian language, and his brother surprised Eastern Ukrainian people when he came to Zaporizhzhia and spoke Ukrainian here, because Ukrainian people, they are very surprised when foreigners, when Africans or Middle Eastern people learn Ukrainian and speak this language. Also, another teacher of English in our city was a student from Zambia, and she also studied and lived in our city. At the moment, both of them, a student from Zimbabwe and a student from Zambia, they returned to their countries because the full-scale attack of Russia against Ukraine. Then I knew guys from Morocco who were running shawarma and doner outlets. I spoke to them a lot about everything. One of them moved to Kharkiv. Kharkiv is a big Ukrainian city near a border of Russia. And another guy moved to Poland. At least he told me that he was planned to move to Poland. And then he in Zaporizhzhia lived another guy from Northern Africa. He decided to stay in our city even during these times, during the war, and so he lives here. Another case, I ordered doner in a fast food outlet, and an Asian man started speaking Ukrainian with a client, with a woman, and it was very unusual because in Russia, in the Russian Empire, languages of national minorities were oppressed and are oppressed, and Russians describe Ukrainian as a language that doesn't exist, or language of uneducated peasants. And Ukrainians, they enjoy when foreigners learn Ukrainian and speak Ukrainian language. By the way, I know a YouTube blogger with Afghani roots. He speaks Ukrainian like a native speaker, and he runs his YouTube channel in Ukrainian. So a person with Afghani roots runs a YouTube channel in Ukrainian, in Ukraine. It's interesting. Then about other cases. Here in Zaporizhzhia we have a Jewish synagogue, house of meeting, Beit Knesset. Then we have a Catholic temple. Before the war, a lot of students from Latin America, from Asia, visited this Catholic temple in our city, and it was interesting to see foreigners who came to the temple in our city, Catholic temple. By the way, about religion, I have read on social networking sites that a lot of freedom fighters and other defenders of rights are blaming Ukrainian government for attempts to conduct investigations against the so-called Russian Orthodox Church in Ukraine. First of all, this is not a church, but rather a network of Russian spies, and this network was created by Joseph Stalin in 1943. Maybe most of you don't know this, but Joseph Stalin, he destroyed Russian Orthodox Church in the 1930s, and then in 1940s he created a new organization, but it was not a church, it was an organization created by communists to spread misinformation and to be used by the communists. It is the same if, for example, Fidel Castro would create a pseudo-Catholic organization which would spread misinformation and other narratives which would be useful for the Cuban government. The same is with the Russian church. It is actually not church but a spy organization. Then, and by the way, when the full-scale Russian attack had started, these Russian spies, they often helped Russians, they did a lot of bad things, and adequate citizens of Ukraine wouldn't behave like them. Then, by the way, some of my relatives, they attend these pro-Russian temples, and they are told conspiracy theories spread by Russians. It's very, very sad. Then, if compared to Russia, Ukraine is really a tolerant country, because Ukrainians, they don't care if people near them speak foreign language or if foreigners have other traditions. In Russia, the situation is opposite. Russians, they hate foreign languages, they hate languages of national minorities, and they hate Ukrainian language, and Russians would like to Russianize any person from any country of the world. Russians try to control any religious organization or any group inside of Russia. And by the way, Russians, they close Christian churches in the regions occupied by them, by Russian aggressors. Here in Zaporizhzhia, we have people who, Christians who run from other cities occupied by Russians, and they say that Russians, they close their churches, they steal equipment, property from Christian churches, and it's really sad that the world, people of the world don't know about this situation. And the next topic which I would like to discuss, it is about gender equality. Often when you hear this about gender equality, you may think it is about rights of women, but I would like to speak about rights of men. In Ukraine, everything is revolving around women. Women in Ukraine, they are privileged and they can do whatever they want to. Women in Ukraine may declare sexist statements against men. Women in Ukraine, they may be almost naked and walking down streets. Women in Ukraine, they enjoy freedom almost in everything. Freedom of traveling. A lot of Ukrainian women, they left Ukraine, they left their husbands, they technically stole children and moved to Europe, Canada or USA in attempts to find European or American guys who will provide them with money and support. And of course you may say that my opinion is unusual, but it is so. And the next question, you may ask, why do Ukrainian men do nothing to fight for their male rights? The answer maybe is that in Ukraine, men do really believe in all the informational crap about the so-called strong gender, males, and the so-called weak gender, females. When women need, they demand rights, and rights for Ukrainian women and responsibility for Ukrainian men. By the way, the situation in Russia is the same. Ukrainian and Russian societies, they are often intertwined, and don't think that Russia is a country of the traditional values. No, Russia has no tradition, Russia has no values, Russia has the same social problems like in Ukraine. It is low birth rates, problems with male rights, and so and so. For example, if a man in Ukraine cares about his health, then society considers him as a weak man. That's are my thoughts. So I told you about foreigners, I told you about religion, and I told you about gender equality, but from the unusual point of view. And by the way, foreigners in Ukraine, they may be not only Africans, Asians or Latin Americans, they may be also Europeans or Americans. Here we also have British guys who live in Zaporizhzhia, American guys who may marry Ukrainian women and live here and we like foreigners. Also, about national minorities. In Ukraine, we have a lot of national minorities. They may be Gypsies, Jews, Tatars, Turks, Hungarians, Poles, Belarusians, by the way, a lot of Russians too. But our Ukrainian Russians, often lots of Russians in Ukraine, they accepted pro-European way, pro-Western way, and even being Russian, they don't want to be back to Russia. They want to live in Europe, to live in a civilized country with freedom. But as I described, here in Ukraine we have a lot of problems in our society. Of course, there may be some clashes, some fights between people, but I believe these clashes and fights, these misagreements, they are not about nationality, not about race. It is more about just social problems or interpersonal misagreements. Ukrainians, I believe, Ukrainians are very tolerant, and when Ukrainians come to another countries, usually Ukrainians don't create closed communities. Ukrainians try to assimilate into their society they come in. If Ukrainians come to France, they will study French language, and I read about some Ukrainians who stayed in Afghanistan. They learned Afghani traditions, Afghani languages, and they married Afghani women and live there. So Ukrainians, they may live in America, in Europe, and Ukrainians may live in Asia, in the Middle East, in Africa too, and everything will be fine. So I hope this video, my speech was interesting for you, and I would like to get your feedback. I understand my speech might be controversial, maybe not the best, but I would like to read your comments and your opinions. So, bye bye.